Now that you know how input fields work in Angular material, let's take a look at the date picker component. So here on an Angular material website, let's go to form controls and look at this date picker. First, in the API tab, we can see this is defined in MD date picker module. So here in app module, I'm going to import MD date picker module. Okay. Now back in the documentation, let's take a look at the overview tab. So here's our date picker. You can click this icon. We get this beautiful date picker. We select the date and it's displayed here. So now let's take a look at the markup. This may look a little bit complicated at first, but I'm going to break it up. It's very easy. Back in app-component.html, first we need to add an input. So as you learned in the last lecture, we need to put our input inside MD input container element. So here we add an input and also apply the MD input directive. Now after this, we need to add a date picker. So MD-date picker. Now we need to connect this date picker to this input field we created earlier. So first we need to assign a variable here. Let's call this birth date. And then on this input element, we apply MD date picker directive and bind it to this template variable, that is birth date. So this way we linked these two elements, okay? Now it's also common to add an icon, like the icon of a calendar here. So in this input container, we add a button. We want this to be a suffix for our input field. So we apply MD suffix directive. Now we apply another directive, that is MD date picker toggle. And once again, we bind this to this template variable we defined here. So birth date. So this is the basic markup. Let's test this. Back in the browser, we get a blank screen. So let's take a look at the console. No provider found for date adapter. You must import one of the following modules at your application root: MD native date module, or provide a custom implementation. So at the time of recording this video, this date picker module is built on top of the native date object in JavaScript. But currently, the team behind Angular material is working to add support for moment.js dates. So then in the future, we're going to have another module, and you will be able to choose between native date objects in JavaScript or moment.js dates. So here we need to import MD native date module into our app module. So back in app module, in the imports array, I'm going to add MD native date module and import this from Angular/material. Save, and back in the browser, let's refresh. All right, here's our date picker. So we can click this icon. We get this calendar pop-up. This calendar pop-up has two modes, the months mode and the year mode. So by default, it opens in the months mode. And here you can see, we see all the days of the current month. We can click here to switch to the year mode. So now we are in 2017. We see all the months in this year. And then we can navigate back and forward. It's a beautiful calendar icon. I really like it. So let's select a date. Let's say 3rd of August, and it's displayed in the input field. Now let me show you something. Note that here, we don't see all the days in August, because I'm working with a small browser window to simulate a mobile device that doesn't have a lot of real estate. So if you look at this application on a mobile phone, this is not a good user experience. Let me show you how to solve this problem. So back in app-component.html, here on our MD date picker element, we need to set touch UI attribute or property, more accurately, to true. Now back in the browser, let's click this again. Now we have a better view. We see more days here, and we can also scroll. So make sure to always set Touch UI to true. Now let's take a look at a few other functions of this date picker. By default, if you don't have a date here in this input field, when you click this calendar pop-up opens with the current day selected. So today is 1st of August 2017. If I put a date here, let's say January 3rd, 2017, the calendar pops up with January 3rd of 2017 selected. Now, another thing we can do here is set a range of valid dates. For example, you may want to limit your user to select a date between 1st of January 2017 and let's say 1st of August 2017. So here in app component, we can set the min and max properties of this input element. So, in HTML5, we have min and max. In Angular, we use property binding syntax and bind this to a field or property in our component. So let's go to app.component.ts. I'm going to delete all this code here. Instead, I'm going to define min date and set it to a date object. So note that here we're using a native JavaScript date object. In the future, when we have support for moment.js dates, we can use those kind of objects here. So let's set a date here. Let's say 2017, 1st of January. And similarly, I'm going to define another field, max date, and set this to 1st of August. Now back in our template, I'm going to bind this min property to min date and the max property to max date. Let's see what happens. Now when I click this, technically all the days after the 1st of August should be disabled. But this is currently a bug in the date picker component, and the team behind this is aware of this. They're currently working on it. So hopefully in the next release, this will be fixed. So if you go to September, you can see the 1st of September is enabled, but all the other dates are disabled. So there is a simple bug in how this date picker calculates the min and max dates. Now, another thing that is currently not implemented is displaying an error when the user adds an invalid date. For example, if I type 1234 here or type my name here, we don't get any error messages. Again, this is an issue that Angular Material team are working on. If you want to keep track of this issue on GitHub, head over to github.com/angular/material2/issues/4978. Now let me show you one last thing before we finish this lecture. Sometimes you may want to display the calendar automatically. This is very easy to implement. So let's go back to the documentation for Date Picker. On the API tab, if you scroll down, you can see this Date Picker has a couple of methods, open and close. So we're going to call the open method to open the calendar when the input field gets focus. So back in our template, I'm going to bind the focus event of this input field. And here I'm going to call the open method of our date picker. Earlier we defined this template variable here, birth date. So we can use this to reference our date picker. Birth date dot open. Like this. Now back in the browser, when I click here, we get this calendar. Beautiful. So this is our date picker in Angular Material. Currently, it has a few bugs, and it also lacks a few features. Once again, if you look at the Overview tab in the documentation for this component, here you can see the status of this date picker. And in the future, when you watch this video, chances are this is going to be different. So in the future releases, the Angular Material team are going to add support for date times. They're also going to add support for displaying date ranges. They're going to add support for custom time zones. They're going to implement infinite scrolling through calendar months and add support for moment.js dates.